as a former finance minister, I think it's also right for me to ask you this. The main issue that played out in this election, obviously, was about the economy and what people were feeling, in their pockets. John Mahama, once again, I've been asking this question over and over and again, but I still want to ask you. John Mahama has promised a lot of freebies. First-year students in our universities are not going to pay fees. He's promised to scrap a lot of taxes. You've been a former finance minister. Don't you get worried when you hear some of these things? Are you not scared about what is likely, to happen, especially when you admit that the economy is not in a better place?
There is a certain rationality behind the measures which are misunderstood. And let me explain the taxes. Up to 2016, we had levies which were brought in anytime we had to do austerity, and they were taken out. Secondly, when the value-added tax was introduced, about 18 taxes were subsumed, cancelled, and subsumed in a VAT. This included GETS fund. Actually, the GETS fund and the NHIL, which became straight levies, were part of the VAT. Now, the flaw in reintroducing many of these taxes is that you make it difficult for the tax regime to be administered, and you make it difficult for taxpayers to comply with the tax because it becomes very complex. If you have to account for 23 different, taxes, as His Excellency counted during the campaign. What we are talking about is going back to the rationalization of the 1980s and 90s under the SAP-ERP and making sure that the tax is dependent on the 4 pillars, which are income tax, VAT, tariffs or customs duty, and excise duty. These are the pillars of the tax regime. And if I may inform you that the tax-to-GDP ratio until 2023, when we entered the fund program, had been stagnant since 2015. That was the highest. And it tells you, therefore, that these levies and others that were introduced have rather made the tax regime less buoyant. Less buoyant in the sense that, remember that from 2017, we were supposed to expand the economy better and raise more taxes with 3 additional oil fields. Now, when it comes to the other measures, remember that it is this administration that also destroyed the buffers that were built to make the economy resilient. To your last question, now there is a rationalization, I'm using the word, advisedly, that is to take place with elementary, secondary, tertiary education in this country, right? Remember that our approach with a progressively free education was to populate the country with day schools, as is done in the advanced countries, where you debondize as much as possible, of course over a transitional period. Therefore, you will see that if you expanded day schools into the communities, as Nkrumah did, remember, with his private schools, with his secondary schools, which of course had boarding, you will be reducing the cost of implementation of education. And it is with these savings that you are able, as the President explained, to help poor kids. What's the point in going to secondary school if you cannot, in the first year, enter tertiary until you are able to move on to the student.
Okay, so for the ordinary Joe on the streets of Accra and other parts of the country, I'm sure the question obviously on their minds right now is it possible? Is it feasible? Is it going to happen? All those taxes that John Mahama promised is going to scrap within his first 120 days.
I just told you. No, there were two groups of taxes. There were, to use the word, nuisance taxes that were to go in 120 days. The other ones will be phased out. Remember, we're also in a fund program, and we have to be sure. If you do it precipitously, you will end up, not having the. So there's a rationalization. There is a timetable for the immediate ones and then the other one. But let me also point out.
So it's going to happen.
Yes, it has to happen because it happened before. Right. And for the ordinary man who is saying, you know, how can you achieve this? Let us remind them that deficit was 6.1 under Mahama before it got to 15%. Debt was 57% under Mahama before it got, you know, to over 100% with the contingency funds. Inflation was lower. Take all the indices, right? And therefore, what we are saying is that they were not the best, the ideal that we wanted to get to, but taking them back to that is something that was done, that was achievable.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure talking to you. You just had former Finance Minister Seth Tekpe there saying it is possible. It is possible to scrap some of the